Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
Welcome. Kadie Smith of Dropcap Design is joining us today for another episode of the Becoming Obsessed podcast, where we really focus on loving the life that you're currently living and then making decisions to create the life that you love, that you really want to have. And Kadie is so phenomenal. I have been following along on her journey for at least 5 years now. She is the founder of Dropcap Design and is a traveling art director and brand strategist. She's currently living in Costa Rica, which, if you've been around here at all, you know I love Costa. And she and her team are really committed to building magnetic identities for modern brands. She has a super talented team. I just saw one of the posts that you made for, was it Ashlyn Wrights? And her website is so phenomenal. Your website is so phenomenal. I am so obsessed with all the little details and functions that you put in. I know that you have worked with over 200 independent businesses to really help tell a story that captivates their audience. And I know you do full service creative at the agency and have an academy of programs to help brands stand out at any stage. And just following along, I can see how much detail goes into all of this. But I really am curious about your brand to start. Where did the name Dropcap Design come from? What's the story there?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. So I started off in design school thinking that I was for sure going to go into publishing. I love to write. I love to design layouts. I thought the magazine world was everything I ever hoped to do with my career. But when I graduated from design school, it was really when print was having a tough time. It was 2013. It was going through a huge transition. They weren't sure how the industry was going to respond to more digital news media and more immediate content consumption. So I went to an agency, hated it, started my own thing. And as soon as I started working with my first team member, so it was like 2 years into freelancing, I realized that Design by Kadie was going to be really misleading. I started building a team. I knew I wanted it to tie back to my editorial roots of why I love design in the first place. And I started kind of going through terminology and what I loved most about design school and why I loved being a designer. And I remember in my first magazine layout course, we learned about drop caps, which is this really large illustrated letter at the beginning of a paragraph. And anytime we did book layout or article layout, I would have the most fun with that one letter because it was an opportunity to be really playful when everything else was really technical. And I started thinking about it and I was like, that's actually kind of how I view our brands. They're this one big distinct moment that sets the stage, but it's still part of the paragraph. It's still part of the industry. It's still highly relevant to the whole context, but it still stands out a little bit and is very distinct and has a lot of personality and really tells the story in a bigger way. And so I landed on Dropcap for the name, and it's been the philosophy of how we approach branding.
I love that. And hearing you talk, it's like I'm even connecting more dots between what I've seen from you and from Dropcap. I know you have the Sunday edition, the email newsletter, and it kind of has that, right? Where it's like this huge E and it feels very much like print. And I thought that was so ingenious because it feels like it has such a strong intention and brand presence behind it. But it also, I absolutely love using email as a way to make that really strong connection. And that's how I know a lot about you, right? I feel like before we hopped on here, I was like, I know you and you don't know me. And it's fun through those newsletters to really get to see the story, get to see the move to Costa Rica, how all of that went. And I would love to hear more about that move to Costa Rica. And maybe also we talk so much about, I have a lot of digital nomads that come on here and we talk a lot about the great parts and the fun stories, but also the parts that are maybe a little bit more difficult that people don't think of. So through all of the transitions, whether it was to Costa Rica or other places, what have been kind of the hardest pieces of your life, whether it was work or otherwise to keep in flow or to keep in balance?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's interesting because the way that I've traveled and moved has been such an evolution from when I first started. I went into freelancing really because my agency job wasn't giving me enough vacation to go home for Christmas, for the holidays. And I was just saw this long-term thing where I was like, I'm not going to be able to spend time with family and I'm not making enough for this to be remotely worth it. So I started freelancing with the very low threshold of just wanting to spend more time with family. And then about a year later, I started dating a photojournalist and we would travel based on his assignments and projects. And that's when I spent time in Africa and Scotland and England and traveled more internationally. And I realized it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. It was a lot easier to get around. It was a lot easier to maintain clients. So it was kind of my taste into that world. And when that relationship ended, it was right before COVID. And I decided to travel solo to Nicaragua. And I was actually there when the whole pandemic broke out, which is a great first introduction to solo travel is a worldwide pandemic. But I think the hardest part of that is I've always very much felt inspired by travel. I like being out of my comfort zone. I like switching up my environment. I thrive in change and movement and transitions. I just love the feeling that you don't know what's around the corner. It really gets my creative juices flowing. But what I romanticized as far as inspiration went, I struggled when I went there long term because I was in this constant state of, I'm only here for such a small amount of time. I want to experience everything. I want to see everything. But 6 weeks is kind of a long time to just be,
Like in
half doing your
flux.
work. Yeah. I was like, my client's like, yeah, stoked that you're inspired, but we still need to launch our website. So at some point, you're going to need to not be, riding motorbikes down dirt roads and taking surfing lessons and working behind your computer. And honestly, that was the hardest part for me mentally is I felt such guilt being in such a beautiful place and spending a majority of the day inside on my computer. There was like this part of me, it's like, I'm not taking advantage of this experience. I'm not living fully in the moment. But then I would have to remember, I'm also not here on vacation. I'm choosing to work in a different location, but the work still needs to get done. And once I made that mental shift of like immense gratitude that I could even have an hour on the beach in the tropics was so infinitely worth it. Even if I can't spend the whole day there, even getting a little bit of time is very, very worth it. And I just felt so grateful for that it made it a lot easier to maintain routine and ritual, even when my environment was changing and I wanted to be a vacation traveler.
You are speaking my language so much because that's why I almost like refuse to go on week-long or like 2-week-long even trips. It's because I don't take time off from getting the work done. And so I need long enough to do what I feel like it feels like I'm living there, right? Even 6 weeks with that mindset of like, okay, I'm just doing what I was doing back home, but instead of watching Netflix, I'm now going to the beach. I'm now riding ATVs, like I'm taking surf lessons, and I can have a slower paced day, or I can kind of, go do things in the morning and then work at night. But having that mentality of like, I'm just living here and I'm living in a place that's a little bit more beautiful or adventurous or one thing or another, so that it is feeling inspired and feeling really, I find especially when I've been in Costa Rica, it's just the like energy of, okay, we're not rushing around, but we're like more in tune with nature. I love like walking and the howler monkeys are above, and like it just is this different energy and pace, which can feel really hard to like sit behind a computer. And there's been lots of times where I'm like in a super sweaty co-working space being like, oh my gosh, I need to get this done so I can get outside. But it also kind of encourages me to work more efficiently so that I can get outside, right? When you're like, okay, let's hit this deadline early so that I can have a day at the beach and not even think about work.
Yes, absolutely. It's helped me not over or underwork being here. When I first started, I lived in Dallas and my whole group of friends, we were all entrepreneurs. We all like felt very entrepreneurial. We all had our side hustles we were building. And so we were just working around the clock. And it didn't feel like work because we were doing it together, late nights with, glass of wine or making dinner. We all have our laptops out. We're all building our thing. But I definitely got into a huge burnout mentality during that season. And my move to Montana, and that was my first time of like this spacious. I was in a tourism town where everyone's not on the internet trying to, be the next Jeff Bezos, but they actually were enjoying the environment. And that was nice. But I think even since I've moved to Costa Rica, it's taken it to an even further level where I'm around fewer Americans. And I think that the American mentality is very work, 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 because everything you want in life is a result of the amount of hours that you put in working. And our town here in Costa Rica is primarily Europeans, and Europeans just do not think that way. It's actually been nice where I was here for probably a solid year before anyone even knew what I did. They would just say, oh, she works on her computer all the time. And then I've been here a year and a half, and it's probably been in the past 2 months that people have been like, I had no idea you were a designer.
And like a super amazing, super talented, successful, because I have a lot of friends that are designers, right? I'm very much in that space too. And a lot of people that I really admire their work, but you guys really, I feel like, are leading the industry in doing things that no one else is doing and leading with brand in such a way that I'm like, I coach wedding pros. And so one of the things, especially in the wedding industry, is you have to have some clear branding. And I'll use your website as an example, or I've directed people to look at it because I'm like, you get such a clear idea of who you are, who you're for, and how you help them. And I'm like, done better best. We don't have to be at this level, but this is where I want us heading. I don't want us sounding like everyone else and, just saying whatever, but it really is not just, and I say this because it's when you meet somebody and you're friends with them and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, have you ever seen this designer? She's great. And then you're like, oh, that's me. I could just see that happening with you where somebody's like, hey, I'm looking for a website designer. I found this drop cap design. She has the same name as you. And you're like, yep, she does because it's me.
Well, it's always just really sweet when people first find out, because I used to lead with it and I felt like my business is my whole identity. And then I just really burned through that identity quickly and found a bunch of hobbies and things in my life that felt, more interesting and dynamic. And so drop cap fell further and further on the conversation list when I was just meeting people in a personal setting and not professionally. And so now I'm coming back into the fold where I'm getting to do projects with friends and getting local clients here, which is really fun. And so it's just, it's been really funny where people are like, wait, what do you do? We had no idea.
That's amazing. You kind of mentioned in there too, what I love where it's okay, work and life are separate. You can and should love both of them and they can flow together. But I think it was such a pre-COVID mentality where all of us were yeah, let's all co-work for 24 hours a day and build these huge things. And then COVID came. And then after COVID, I think we've all kind of been I don't want to work this much. I don't want to sit behind a computer, especially this much. And so as you are growing and maintaining a successful business, what is enough for you? How do you know when to just kind of sit and maintain what you've built versus grow something new? How do you find that balance and make those decisions?
Yeah, it's funny because DropCap turned 10 this year, last month. And I think for most of that beginning 10-year chapter, enough was always a number. It was always I want to be making this much and then it's enough. Well, that number just kept, it was so easy to every time we would get close to it, oh, but if I got this course or if I hired this person and spent just a little bit more money, then I could make so much more money. And then you're trying to recover your investment and scale, and suddenly your whole world is a bunch of numbers that are moving constantly. And so what I've changed is at the beginning of the year, my creative brain likes this more too. The mood board, what do I want this year to look like and feel like? How many brands do I want to be a part of building? What's that number? Money aside. And then what do I want my life to feel like? Do I want to be making it down for sunset every day? Do I want to be learning a different language, and all of these things that are going to fill my life beyond work? And then where does work come into that and how can they mesh together? And for me, it's like I'm realizing I can't work every night and weekend because all of the things I really want in my life need to happen then. There's got to be space to enjoy it. I also am a huge fan of Shanna Skidmore. She's a financial coach. She's great. And she teaches finances from that same mentality of enough. And from this idea of like, what are you building towards? It's not just like, a 6-figure business or $1 million business. It's I know, what do you want your life to actually look like? And part of the reason I moved down to Costa Rica is that life looks simpler here. I'm not trying to get like the biggest, nicest house in the most expensive place. Like we're about to close on some property here in Costa Rica. And like I have this vision of this coastal tropical bungalow. And when I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is so attainable. I don't have to work nearly as hard as I thought I would to attain this. And it actually suits me so well. And so I think taking out the money milestone and instead cutting in with this, what really fills my soul, which is like, what's beautiful, what's fulfilling, like what's going to make me feel inspired. And it's not a number necessarily. It's what does that number produce and keeping my mind on that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to say, everybody, pause right now, literally rewind like 2 minutes and listen to all of that again, because that just summed up the whole point of the season of the podcast of Becoming Obsessed that we're in, where I have been using this framework from Cultivate What Matters. They basically have this 90-day Power Sheets planner, and they're like, okay, here are 8 areas of life. And you're hitting on so many where it's like, yes, finances and career, but also your friends, your hobbies, your personal growth, your home and your space. What balance do you want to have? And I've been playing with the idea of like, what do I need to do to just maintain certain areas when I'm in periods of growth for others? And I love that you're like, okay, here's the home and this is more attainable, especially when it's like, I think getting out of what you were talking about earlier, the US mentality of working more and having more. I find myself so often being like, I don't need a big house. I don't need a super nice car. And then at the same time, I'm like, okay, I need to grow my agency. I need to grow like all this stuff. I'm building a team. And it's so easy to find myself just sitting in a place where I'm like, okay, but what am I growing to? And like, what number is that? And what is that going to get me? And like, why is that the number? And to some extent, it feels like you need to have a numerical for business, right? Kind of like what you were saying, where it's like at the beginning of the year, take count of like, how many brands do I want to work with? What type of packages, like what are we going to be doing to hit what I need to, but not necessarily making it higher and higher and higher for the sake of it. I think for me, I'm trying to find ways to remember that. Because if you ask me, I will say I don't care. But do my actions really match that? Like, I think I'm so deep in the culture of being an entrepreneur and hustling and whatever, that even though I know I don't want that, my actions still sometimes are like, okay, $1 million business, $1 million business. And it's like, for what? I don't necessarily want to work that hard or like have that much responsibility or, lack of freedom and flexibility.
Yeah. One of my friends in town, she's French. And I was just talking to her about what I was doing with work. She goes, all Americans have so much money and no idea what to do with it. I was like, it's so true because money's the goal. And one thing I've been really trying to put into practice this year, and I've never done this before, is having a very clear end time to my day. I always, like when I was at the agency, like you went in when you were supposed to go in and you left when it was time to leave. And I would leave that work there. And if it didn't get finished, then I had been overscheduled anyways, and we would figure it out later. And I totally threw that mentality out the window when I started my business. And I pushed my own boundaries so much. Like I pushed my boundary in how much time I would spend working on something or what I was investing in or taking out of my personal pay to buy a course or outsource something or hit the easy button in one way or another. And I'm not saying necessarily boundaries in the sense of like telling clients I can't, speak to them after a certain time. Some of those things are good, but I'm even saying I pushed my own boundaries. Like I didn't hold or respect any of the lines in my life. So I would go from way overworked to way underworked and never was able to find that equilibrium that actually brings sustainable growth.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing to find because there isn't a true formula for it. Like you said, you have to go through, okay, this is too much. Well, now this isn't enough. Like, how do I even know what that enough is when it comes to like the working hours I want to have? And then once you know what that looks like, how do I build that consistency? How do I book out clients? How do I market to make sure there is enough? Which all comes with having to do more. And then it's so easy to be like, well, I hit this goal, but was that really the goal? And just not, I think, taking time to sit in the accomplishments of like, okay, this is what I want it to look like. This does feel really good. How do I keep doing this? And I think to your point too, I've been thinking a lot about like, I live with my sister right now and it's super great and it allows me to travel. And I have this like old beater car, which is also like great. It just doesn't have AC. And here in Nebraska, the summer is going to get hot. But at the same time, I'm like, but all of this is serving me. And yes, I could do something else, but I'm going to have to work more to like facilitate having that and not lose the standard of anything else. And I think through really trying to figure this out, I've come to a new definition of like freedom. And I used to be like, okay, freedom is like the ability to say yes to opportunities. And now I think it's really having wiggle room where it's like, I can take a couple days off when I don't feel good and things are still like they're still going. Nothing is getting super dropped, or I can work more. I could take on a project or I could go on a trip, but it's like having that wiggle room where it's like, okay, how do I make sure I don't overextend where that disappears?
Exactly. It's the freedom of choice. I'm like, I want to be able to choose. Do I want to take time off because this is a beautiful experience that I know is going to like give a lot? Or do I want to choose to buckle down and work because there's something that I want to accomplish that's going to like fill my professional soul, you know? When we were contemplating purchasing this property here, I knew that because of the way that everything works, buying something as an expat, it was going to be really complicated and very expensive. So I was like, okay, when I looked at my calendar, like, I've already done my 2024 goals. Like this wasn't on the list. So throwing it out the window and saying like, okay, I've been presented with this amazing opportunity. It wasn't what I was planning on doing this year. It was what I was planning on doing in 5 years. It just happened to go a lot sooner. So how do I pivot without burning out? I'm like, okay, so here's the window of what I would need to do before we close to feel good doing that and not reckless. And then baking in just as necessary time off. So we were talking about it. I was like, okay, so it's going to be push, push, push until we close on the land in June. And then it's so tempting to keep hustling because now we've got to build. And I was like, no, it is a mandatory, non-negotiable, at least month, maybe to break from grinding and getting this going to just pause, reset, reevaluate, just breathe a little. And then we can start pushing towards the next goal. But if I don't have that little breathing room afterwards, I just completely fry.
And if you don't, like, I love that you're planning that ahead, because when you don't plan it ahead and you just come up to it, it feels so much worse to be like, why do I need a break? I shouldn't need a break. And it's like, well, look at what you just did. You probably needed a break 2 weeks ago.
Well, and I'll know, like, okay, I know when that day comes and it's closed and done, I'm gonna be like, I just spent so much money. What do you mean I'm gonna take a month off? I can't take a month off. I need to like make it all back. But when I have it in the plan, I'm like, no, girl, you earned this. You knew what was coming. Just chill. And another thing is that I know even in the online space, like these are hard skills. And I tell this to designers that I'm mentoring too, like work will come. People will always need websites. People will always need brands. People will always benefit from creative services. Like no AI, nothing's going to come and completely eradicate the need for creative problem solving and design. So if I take a little bit of a break, the industry will still be there. It's okay.
Yep. That abundance mindset. It's like there will always be. And if there isn't, I have all the skills built up to pivot and serve in the ways that are needed. Right? It's like, even if everything does change, I've built it once, I can do it again.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to shift us a little bit because before we hop off, I really want to know your recommendations for Nicaragua. I know you said you were there maybe like 4-ish years ago. I'm thinking of going there in June, actually. And so I'm like, you said that, and I was like, give me all of your recommendations. Like, tell me where to go, tell me what to do.
Well, I spent a significant amount of time in Playa Maderas, which is in the San Juan del Sur area. That was really nice, especially if, I don't know if you surf or are beginning to, but it's a nice little like kind of bay area where it's very beginner friendly, like very nice crowd. And that was a really fun spot to go. I stayed in a place called Buddha Rock, which I think it was being sold in like 2021. I don't know if it's still there, but great little places to stay right on the Playa Maderas beach. It's amazing. But then I actually recommend most Popoyo. It's a great, great spot. Fun beach town, has Magnificent Rock, which is this famous little surf area. And they have this beautiful restaurant at the end of the rock divide. So you can like have the cocktail, watch people surf sunset, and it's just beautiful. And it's right by this development called Rancho Santana, which is like kind of a nicer expat development area, but they have like yoga classes and juice bars, and it's really, really nice. And there's still so much in Nicaragua that I would still love to explore, but those two spots are really great.
Speaking of recommendations, have you explored much of Costa Rica, or did you kind of find a spot and plant?
You know, I kind of found a spot and planted, and I found this spot by chance because I was going to go back to Nicaragua because I loved it. And you'll love your trip. It's amazing. It's like everything in Costa Rica, but half the price. Like, I couldn't recommend Nicaragua more. Really loved it. But I felt like right after COVID, they were just really kind of bouncing back. They'd had an election. It's always a bit contentious in Nicaragua. They had really suffered from the pandemic, and it just felt like it wasn't going to be the place that I originally went. A lot of the businesses had shut down. A lot of things were in the process of being sold. And so I last minute pivoted and came to Costa Rica, and I was looking at Airbnbs, and my travel budget had been for Nicaragua. And then looking at Costa Rica, it's twice as expensive easily. I mean, it's so much more expensive than Nicaragua. So I knew I liked the Guanacaste region because I'd been to Nosara before. And I found one Airbnb in a little town called Playa Negra, or Los Pargos, which it's by the beach break Playa Negra. I had never heard of it before, but it was like within my budget. And sight unseen, I just booked it for 2 months. It's like, cool, just see how it is. And if I hate it, I'll cancel it or whatever. Came down, and it was the best experience. Immediately went home, put all my stuff in storage, and moved back down. But I've been in the whole Guanacaste area, and then I've been to Monteverde and the mountains, like the cloud forest, magnificent. But I still want to explore a lot more of like the South and Central Valley.
Yeah. When I was there, I did 3 months traveling to a new place every 7 to 10 days. So I feel like I did like the full tour. And speaking of like trying to keep up with work, my intention like was to do what you did, where it's like, okay, I'm going to book a place for like 3 months and just sit and like go to the beach, work, and eat. Like that was my plan. But my partner at the time had like a sabbatical from work. And so I was like, what are you going to be doing? And he's like, let's just adventure the whole time. And I was like, well, all right, let's just do it. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. I've gone back since. Honestly, I absolutely love going to Manuel Antonio. It's like my favorite beach. Manuel Antonio National Park is my favorite beach I've ever been to. It is just so gorgeous. It's definitely like kind of like a 60, 70-year-old retirement town feel in some ways. And you really want a car or to take the public transit because it is just like so hilly, walk in everywhere. But that would be my one. Like if you're looking for a trip, Manuel Antonio National Park would be the one. And you get to drive over a bridge with all of these like crocodiles underneath. I think I counted like 28 of them. So that was like really cool, but freaky.
I love that. Yeah, there's still a lot that I want to like travel around and see. I'm like, gosh, I really need to start a travel blog or something, add it to the list. But Costa Rica is such an amazing destination, and I've really loved being here.
I am a little bit jealous, but also on my own travels. So I got to focus on that. But yeah, Costa Rica is a dream and something that I am completely obsessed with. But that leads me to my last question for you. What is something or some things that you're currently obsessed with?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Right now, I'm obsessed with learning Spanish. I have always wanted to be bilingual, and it's such a beautiful language. And I feel like it's the start of learning multiple languages. And so I've been spending time every day practicing, and that has been really fun to just learn how to communicate. I'm such a huge fan, obviously, of communication and storytelling, and to learn how to do it in a different language is just on a different level. I love it. So that's one thing. And then I've also just been obsessed with this whole year, really refining our agency systems and the way the business is structured and getting different departments of the business and just organizing everything to scale. And I've just been deep into like spreadsheets and designing spreadsheets and putting all the pieces together to really build something to last.
Yeah, that's so important. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Kadie. And for everyone listening, how can they get in touch with you, work with you? How should they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me over on Instagram at dropcapdesign, and then our website as well. And also mid-June, we'll be hosting a free design summer school for anyone who's looking to start their own design studio or freelance. It'll be a 3-day event all about becoming a designer. So would love for anyone to attend. You can register on the website. And then we also have a little free download, which is our 10-step guide to starting your own studio. So that is a great way to get started with us. And would love to have you guys join in.
We will put all of that in the show notes for you all. I am so happy that I finally got to have a conversation with you, Kadie, and put a face to the name. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everyone that was listening. Now let's go get obsessed. A huge theme in my conversations and coaching calls with business owners is shedding your shoulds, clearing your mental load of the hundreds and hundreds of shoulds so that you can limit your decision fatigue and spend your energy where it really counts. So if you're finding yourself in this never-ending cycle of thinking, I should post more, I should work out more, I should go to more networking events and call my friends more, I want to help you break the cycle. Let's sit down for a 15-minute chat, completely free, and I'll help you shed 3 major shoulds from your mental load. Just click the link in the show notes to schedule your virtual hangout. And a huge thank you to everyone who makes this podcast happen, my amazing team at Sleeked Marketing and the incredible women at Fast Forward Productions. Now let's go get obsessed.